We are back for week 16. The Steelers 7-7, looking like a long shot for the playoffs, but still 3 games to go in 2023. I'm Matt Gajtka alongside Steelers Now analyst Derrick Bell. This is your Steelers Now pregame scout as they play their second consecutive Saturday afternoon game. 4:30 kick coming up at Acrisure Stadium against the Cincinnati Bengals. Rematch against Cincy after Pittsburgh won the first meeting out there in Ohio. The loss last week, though, at Indy dropped the Steelers from 6th in the AFC all the way down to 10th. And according to Derrick, who just ran the odds on the playoff predictor online, 3% chance of making the playoffs. And even if they win all 3 of their final games here, that's still not even a guarantee. They have them at 80% if they win all 3. And that would be certainly a task that would require some doing, as they have games against 2 motivated bubble teams coming up in Cincy and then at Seattle, and then a division champ in Baltimore, who still might be playing for something because you only get 1 bye in each conference these days. So the Ravens certainly don't have that locked up, at least not quite yet. But let's address the news here first, Derrick, before we get into the X's and the O's, because Kenny Pickett will not be back for this game against Cincinnati. He's been ruled out as of Thursday afternoon. He had been practicing pretty extensively coming back from that ankle injury, but he'll miss his 3rd consecutive game. And Mike Tomlin confirmed it will be Mason Rudolph. So I know you had a take on whether the Steelers should even play Pickett at all down the stretch here whenever he does get healthy. How do you feel about that once he is able to get back on the field?
Yeah, just from the videos that we saw, it looked like, Kenny was still kind of moving a little gingerly, at least the stuff that I saw on the Twitter sphere, if you will. But not overly surprising. It's only been, a couple weeks since he had that the tightrope surgery on his ankle. I just, I've seen a lot of discourse. We are in a situation right now with, 7-7. The Steelers are probably not going to make the playoffs. Let's just call it what it is. But in the event that they did lose this week, or they're eliminated early from the playoffs or what have you, seen a lot of discourse about whether he should play or whether they should just sit him for next year. And something I really just feel really strongly about, man, is like if he's healthy, and that's the key word here, like healthy, and I mean like healthy enough, not just from a pain tolerance standpoint, but healthy enough to where his ankle is good enough to where he can get himself out of harm's way. You don't want to put him out there where his mobility is so strictly prohibited that he can't get out of the pocket or he can't navigate the way he needs to. And that could potentially put him in more danger of getting injured. But if he's healthy, man, he should absolutely play these last 2 games, bar none. Even if the Steelers were to lose Saturday and their playoff hopes officially, ended, he should definitely play, man. Like, I think every snap that he's on the sidelines instead of on the field is just one less opportunity to kind of evaluate him as a player. And I know a lot of takes are, well, he's still in the same offense, or like there's some people that are already saying like, oh, you don't need to see anything else. There's some people saying, oh, just give him a new offensive coordinator next year and start fresh. I think that these even 2 games is valuable experience for him. And it's the opportunity to learn more about him as a player, and 2 more games to see like what type of strengths you're going to try to build on. If he's going to be the quarterback next year, what do you need in an offensive coordinator? What do you need in weapons or things around him in order to make sure that he's successful? And I just think punting on that opportunity makes absolutely no sense to me.
Well, it seems like if Kenny were healthy, he would be playing this week.
Yeah.
So it feels like Tomlin and his staff are on the same page as you there. And yeah, frankly, I'd like to see more regular season games from him, because we know the preseason doesn't tell us a whole heck of a lot, as we discovered this year in painful fashion. So, all right, we addressed that. We can move on to first down as we discuss the Steelers first. Their loss to the Colts, 30-13, and it might not have even been that close. The score might even have flattered the Steelers despite having a 13-0 lead in that first half. Derrick, is it time to talk about defensive coordinator Terrell Austin? Because he's largely avoided a lot of the scrutiny that's been laid upon mainly the offensive coaches this year. Matt Gajtka at the first part of the season, and even recently with how they're going about it by committee, doesn't seem to have improved much of anything. But I think it is time to talk about the defense, and whether it be execution, injuries, or coaching. We've just watched offenses led by Kyler Murray against Arizona, Bailey Zappi of the Patriots, and Gardner Minshew of the Colts all tear up this defense. Big plays down the middle of the field, but also all over the field, chunk plays with regularity. So How would you scrutinize Austin's job and how he's done this year? Because this unit has been largely neutralized during this losing streak.
Yeah, I think the big thing, man, is just the context, or I don't want to say excuse, but the context that everybody's using is well, they're really banged up in the middle of the field, and that is absolutely true. Being down their top two linebackers has been really tough. You can definitely feel that when you watch the tape. You can feel it when you watch the team live. I mean, opposing teams are just absolutely attacking those guys, especially in crucial situations. Like you look at the red zone stuff. It was very, very obvious that whenever Indy got in the red zone, they knew they would get man coverage because that's how the Steelers play. They're fourth in man coverage usage in the red zone, and Minshew's eyes directly as soon as he took the snap was like, all right, where's the linebackers at? Because that's where I'm going. They had a lot of good ideas to kind of expose those guys, and I do think that it's worth talking about just because of how this team's constructed. And look, the offense has been bad all season long. There's no denying that that's the Achilles heel of this team. But people are kind of pointing the finger at a million different ways. But the reason why that the Steelers have lost 3 straight is not because of really anything else other than that the defense has not played very well. Over the last 3 weeks, they're 25th in EPA per play. Now they've had some guys miss, obviously, but their stars have been in the lineup for the most part. Minka Fitzpatrick, did miss, the last half of the game or whatever against Indy, but for the most part, Highsmith, Watt, Cam Hayward, those guys, Ogunjobi, those guys have all been in the lineup. So, it's really difficult because the Steelers only have very specific ways to win football games right now. They have to have the defense play very well, and they have to get turnovers and play that kind of chaotic brand of football over there. And over the last 3 games, they've only forced 1 turnover. That's something that the Steelers were doing at an incredibly high rate, and that's why they call it sometimes like turnover luck. It's just because sometimes that brand of football it just isn't sustainable, and I think that's something that we've seen over the last couple weeks is they're just not generating those splash plays, and like you said, they're allowing a lot of chunk plays over the middle and down the field.
The Colts ran 14 straight times on a clock-killing drive to put the game away last Saturday. That seems to hurt the most, right? Because it's just a matter of straight up beating the guys at the line of scrimmage. And you highlighted it in your film room study piece on Steelers Now Plus. I suggest everyone check that out, entitled Tale of the Trenches. We'll talk about the offensive trenches in a little bit, but on the defensive side, that was just so demoralizing to know that they couldn't stop in this modern age. You can't stop 14 straight runs. You're encouraging your opponent to just call the same plays over and over again and having success. Why do you think that happened against Indy?
Yeah, it's just like one of those things, man, where I feel like if you ask like any football coach or any football guy, I think the worst way to absolutely lose is just, getting kind of punked out at the line of scrimmage. And that's really what I felt like, watching the game live. And then, just going back and watching the tape. I mean, I just felt like that Indy was the more physical team up front in the trenches on both sides of the ball. They really controlled the line of scrimmage. You look at just like early in the game, the Steelers were not able to really generate anything on the ground. Grover Stewart, DeForest Buckner really clogged things up in the middle. And then their pass rush on the outside with the edge rushers, the trio of guys that they've got just absolutely dominated the one-on-ones with Dan Moore and Broderick Jones. So, you mentioned the 14 play drive. The decision from Tomlin to punt there still makes absolutely no sense to me, but it is what it is. But allowing 14 minutes, I think the drive lasted 14 plays. It lasted 9 minutes total. Was just a killer. Like I think I put in the article, it was almost like Shane Steichen was just throwing up like 2 middle fingers and saying like, "Come stop it. We're gonna keep running the ball." They ran the same play 5 times on the drive. I mean, it was almost the same exact formation. They just ran split zone. I mean, it really just a killer kind of demoralizing drive to watch kind of unfold during that situation. So, the defense, there's obviously things working against them, and it would be nice if just every once in a while the offense could kind of bail them out. But we've just gotten to the point in the season where you have to stop almost expecting that. And if the Steelers are going to make the playoffs and go on some like miraculous run right now, the defense is going to not only have to get back to where they were playing, but they're going to have to play even better just based on how the offense has struggled.
And speaking of offense, I hate to talk about the so-called hot button issues on this show, Derek, because I feel like we want to dig in deeper and find some angles that perhaps haven't been considered. But I feel like this does dovetail in with what's been happening this week. George Pickens apparently will play He will not be benched by Mike Tomlin, maybe for a drive. I guess we'll see what happens here because Mike was very mysterious about what repercussions might be coming for Pickens. Well, to use your words, punking out on some block opportunities, one in particular with Jalen Warren near the end zone against Indy. That's the one that's gotten the most scrutiny. But overall this year, he's had some lack of effort, no effort, just switching off while the ball is still in play, while in one case the ball was literally on the field. I believe a fumble against the Bengals the last time out. So it's popped up multiple times where Pickens is just not giving his best. My question to you, big picture, is this guy good enough? Can he be good enough where you can overlook this sort of thing? Because, yeah, it went bad with AB later in his career, but he had already established himself for several seasons as one of the best, if not the best, receivers in the NFL and one of the best in history. Honestly, Pickens is nowhere near that. He's so early in his career. Is this just too big of a red flag to you? Or do you see something in his skill set where you're like, man, if they can just soften some of these edges here, he could really be something?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's just a lack of maturity overall. And, there's been like you said, there's been so much discourse online that it's almost hard to find an angle that somebody isn't already hit on. But, only the guys, like my take on like stuff like this is normally, only the guys in the locker room can really truly tell you how much it matters. My take is that it matters. I don't know that it matters as much as people are saying it does. But it's absolutely a factor. Like Jalen Warren's comments to me were very telling. He came out and said, I would have blocked for him, or we're just different kind of players. And, you want that camaraderie, especially among guys on offense, young guys that you're building around. Obviously, you expect Jalen Warren to be around here for the next couple of years. George Pickens the same way. So you have to wonder like what the relationship is there. How's that all going to play out? Um, but I think the big thing is to like you look at the way Pickens started the season, and then you just look at some of his numbers, some of his involvement over the last couple of weeks, and you can just tell he's frustrated, and that happens when you're playing bad ball, and that's just the reality of it. But I think to Mike Tomlin's point, something he's hit on repeatedly is you have to focus that energy in a positive way, in a constructive way that's going to make him and make the offense better. Not blocking on the goal line doesn't make anybody better. That's really obvious. It's a bad look. But having said that, like, can he be good enough to where some of this stuff can be overlooked? Yeah, absolutely. But as we saw, like, it's not like he's playing poorly. He had that chance at the 50-50 ball last week, kind of a weird play where he ended up getting kind of mossed by Nick Cross, the DB for the Colts. But even, they had chances getting the ball. I mean, you look at the interception that Mitch threw, the second one, he's throwing off his back foot, sails the ball 15 yards over his head. I mean, I think it's just gotten to this boiling point where, he thinks that his numbers probably should be a lot better. And I don't necessarily disagree. But again, there is better, more mature ways to go about things than the way that he's went about it, at least in the last couple of weeks.
And you raised a good point there. It has not been the ideal atmosphere for a young receiver to grow up in. He's being forced to tolerate some subpar play, both from the quarterback, from the line, honestly, not giving enough protection. So there's a lot going on there. It's just really tough to evaluate. I do wonder if the Steelers were, say, 4-10 right now, as opposed to 7-7. Would Tomlin send that message? I think he probably would, but I think he also needs George Pickens on the field in order to keep playoff hopes alive. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, and another thing with I know that every time something happens with the Steelers receivers, like it always goes back to AB. I think here's the thing that I think people often kind of miss is with the Steelers were able to keep that under wraps because not only is Tomlin typically good in those type of situations, but also he AB was going to get the numbers because they had an elite quarterback. That just is what it is. The best way to keep receivers happy is to throw them the football, and when you're not getting the ball thrown to you, those guys typically those diva type tendencies usually pop up more than they don't. So right now, they just don't have a guy like that can just feed the rock to the best player. It's just not how the offense is constructed. It's not how the offense has been ran over the past couple seasons. And then I'll just go back to kind of my thought that I just kept coming back to yesterday after seeing some of these quotes like roll in is I just feel like the Steelers need an adult on offense. Like there's been some talk over the past couple weeks about who the leader is. Kenny Pickett's still kind of finding his way. I always think it's like really difficult for a young quarterback who is not the proven guy long term to go in there and be like the leader of the offense. I think it's a difficult kind of thing because not only are you trying to establish yourself in the league as a player, you're trying to also be the adult, be the grown up in the room. And for a second year guy, I just don't think he's there yet. And you kind of get the feeling of, who are the leaders in the offense? Like the leader in the wide receiver room is Deontay Johnson. Well, Deontay Johnson gave up on a play just a couple weeks ago. Even though he's probably not the most, he's more of a quieter guy too. He's voiced his frustrations several different times this season. So where is the grown up in the room, just on offense right now, to kind of guide them through some troubling times? We think about like Najee Harris, a guy that was a captain a couple years ago. He hasn't been talking to the media over the past couple of weeks. So like I just don't know. The lack of maturity on that side of the ball is just very evident. You listen to TJ Watt's comments about guys not wanting to like fully practice or practice hard when they're scheduled to and stuff like that. And I keep coming back to like, man, this team could really use a star player on offense who knows how to go about their business, and they just don't have that right now. And I think you're seeing some of that.
A football team really is two different teams when you think about it that way, right? TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Minka Fitzpatrick. I'm not sure any degree of example or, I guess, vocal leadership is going to totally get across to a guy on the other side of the football, right? Because they're ultimately trying to accomplish two different tasks here, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, and too, like just like the meeting rooms, like how you go about your preparation. Like we saw like Alan Saunders' video of the receiver drills. Like even a guy like Deontay Johnson, who I've watched the dude practice. Like I know how he works, but obviously that example is not going to the rest of the room. You look at George Pickens, he's jogging through the drill, and it's just not a good look, man. Like there is like if you've ever played ball, you've ever coached ball, you've ever been around ball. At any level, that type of effort is usually resulting in, all right, let's do the drill over again. And it's just especially, I think everything just hurts more, I think, or makes it look more because the Steelers are losing. That's the big deal. Like we can talk about the Steeler way or the standard, whatever. All these things get magnified because the Steelers are losing games, and that's really what has kind of brought a lot of these issues, I feel like, to a boiling point. Is just they're not winning games. So a lot of this like little stuff is getting magnified and getting heightened. So like you said, man, I think they need an adult in the room. Maybe that's a conversation for the offense in the offseason. But we'll just have to see how these next couple of weeks play out. My hope is that we can just get through the rest of the regular season, no more major injuries, and the locker room doesn't combust. And I think you've almost got to take it as a win at this point.
Yeah, right. Expectations have certainly dropped in that regard. And just one last thing about Antonio Brown, if you're making comparisons, I never doubted his effort on the field. That's for sure. The guy was a total professional when he was between the lines. It was just everything else, I think, eventually became too much for Tomlin to handle. Even, what was it, the 2018 finale, Brown sent home, essentially, when there was everything on the line yet for Pittsburgh in that game. So it did get to that boiling point, but it was much later, and it was just a different way. So I'm not sure those comparisons really match up. And of course, the Steelers here at 7-7 in danger of the first losing season for Mike Tomlin. Let's go to third down. And you did mention the offseason, some thoughts there. Looking at the line, you're wondering maybe this is the biggest area where they could bolster because, well, just last week, a pretty good epitome of where the Steelers are at up front on the offensive side. Mason Cole, another rough game, not just getting beat on blocks, but of course the shotgun snaps have been a consistent issue this year too, kind of a big part of the job. Dan Moore was just rated the worst pass protection tackle in the NFL per Pro Football Focus as they updated their rankings last week. Broderick Jones beaten often against the Colts too. So is this the hidden biggest problem for this team, or is it kind of weird to say there's a biggest problem? Maybe it's just the offense in general, but as we all know, when the line isn't doing its job, it can make everybody look like they're not doing their job.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's no denying that the Steelers have had bad quarterback play throughout the entire season, and even if you're grading on a curve for Trubisky's kind of stint in Kenny Pickett's absence, he just hasn't played well. I mean, that much is obvious. He's missed easy throws. He's missing easy throws because he's making mistakes that you wouldn't anticipate a veteran to make with his footwork, fading away, with his eyes not being in the right spot. All those things are absolutely true. Having said that, if you're allowing pressure on over 53% of your snaps, the quarterback's going to struggle, like regardless of who you've got back there, unless you've got some elite guy navigating pressure, navigating the pocket when it's dirty. You're going to have issues. And that was a consistent theme in the Colts tape. You mentioned the struggles of the tackles. I think 14 pressures and 4 sacks between the 2 tackles on last Saturday. That's tough, man. I mean, when you're allowing and getting beat that consistently, and it's really the same things, right? Like Dan Moore Jr., you saw Samson Ebukam, guy we talked about last week, just run straight through his chest because Moore is consistently a guy who has his hand placement wide. He's slow to get his hands on the rusher, and he will give up his chest. So Ebukam just ran straight through his chest multiple times, just bull rushed Moore back into the quarterback. And then Broderick Jones, you saw some of the struggles that we've seen in recent weeks, even dating back to his time at Georgia, just the low hand carriage. So just when he's dropping back in his set, he's almost got his hands down to his ankles and he's slow to get his hands up. So when you're carrying your hands that low, it makes them easier to swipe them away. I know Deo got him twice with the cross chop that I remember. He actually gave up another sack, but it was negated by a penalty. Allen Robinson got tackled down the field, but just a really ugly performance across the board. James Daniels, I think 6 pressures as well. He missed on at least one stunt his way that allowed Mitch to get his clock clean. So it was just a really ugly performance, especially from a team. I like the Colts front. I think they're a lot better than the numbers would indicate they are, but that can't happen. Like this is a Colts defense that has, it's not like they've been just shutting the door on opposing offenses all season long. I mean, this is not an elite unit, even if I do feel like they're just a little bit underrated.
How do you feel about coaching on the line? Do you feel like there's enough talent there, or talent that can be cultivated? And of course, some of these guys are still pretty young, but that might be difficult to project. But just you're a guy who watches players coming out of college, and you make your grades and you assess them in that way coming into the pros. Is there a development issue for the Steelers with their offensive linemen?
Um, I do think that there has to be some conversation about Pat Meyer going into the offseason. Meyer's got a very unique way of teaching the offensive line. He prefers an aggressive mindset. There's a good coaching clinic on YouTube of his where he kind of explains some of his philosophy, some of the drills, the way he teaches certain things. But look, I mean, I think this past offseason, you just look at some of the investments that the Steelers made on the offensive line, and they went out and got Isaac Seumalo. They went out just in recent seasons, went out and got Mason Cole, James Daniels. Dan Moore is really the lone holdover from really before he got here. They trade up to draft Broderick Jones. And do I think the offensive line has been better than maybe it was like 2-3 years ago before he took over? Yeah, but I don't think that the offensive line's been significantly better than it was last season. And I think that hurts when you go sign a left guard to a $30 million contract and you trade up into the early teens to draft what we thought was going to be a franchise left tackle who's playing right tackle right now, which also is a whole different issue. But are you getting the bang for your buck based on the type of investment that you've made in some of these guys? And, Broderick was always a guy that I anticipated kind of struggling a little bit in pass protection as a rookie, which he has. He's made some impact blocks in the run game, and you see some of the flashes with his athleticism. But in terms of like, with him kind of hitting this kind of rookie wall where over the past couple of weeks, especially he struggled in pass protection, I think you have to ask yourself, is Meyer the guy that's going to be able to bring the best out of him? Because he's kind of this moldable ball of clay where he's got an unlimited ceiling with the set of tools, the length, the athleticism, the size. Is he the guy that you want kind of molding a guy like Broderick Jones? I think that's a very interesting question to ask yourself in the offseason. I would personally probably say that they really just need to start over on offense altogether. That's just my take on things.
And there's so much focus on scheme, right, and all of that, but it could be just as much about the guys who are absorbing the blows and trying to give the skill players enough time to do their thing. Okay, let's finally move on to the actual opponent this week. The Steelers have plenty of issues to discuss internally, but they are preparing to play Cincinnati. The Bengals right there with them in the scramble for the final 2 AFC wildcard spots, but the Bengals have won a couple in a row here, and their backup quarterback, no longer the backup, of course, Jake Browning, taken over for Joe Burrow a few weeks back. In fact, didn't look so great against the Steelers the first time out back on November the 26th, the weekend after Thanksgiving. But since then, the stat lines have been improving, putting up some pretty good numbers, QB rating, completion percentage, whatever you want to look at there. he is making some plays, and especially with T. Higgins this past week in a dramatic victory against the Vikings. So, like I said, Pittsburgh gave him some trouble against, or in Cincinnati, I should say, a couple of weeks ago. What do you think has made the difference lately as Browning and the Bengals offense has flipped the switch and have certainly surged here down the stretch?
Yeah, I think the big thing, man, is just as expected, a guy gets a little bit more playing time, he gets more comfortable, and I think that's really what you see with Browning. He's playing more within himself. When they played the Steelers, I mean, it was just what 4 weeks ago. I mean, it
Yeah.
seems like forever ago based on everything that's happened in the Steeler land. But the Steelers were able to get him off of his spot. They were able to kind of force him into creation mode early, confuse him a little bit with some road coverages, some post snap rotation, things like that. Got him to hold on to the ball and make some mistakes. Um, with Browning over the past couple weeks, there are still some times you see on film of his, him turning down some throws, just not playing as fast as he needs to. But there's just been a lot more plays in structure. He looks so much more comfortable in the offense. I think Zach Taylor's done a good job just kind of constructing things in order to play to his skill set. And really, just like you watch the Vikings game, man, like seeing how the Vikings have played against quarterbacks this season, they have just devoured backup quarterbacks, bad quarterbacks all season long. And Browning played pretty well. I mean, he obviously got some help from those two receivers, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. Those are all good things. Having those guys is obviously a big benefit to him, but he was nailing in breakers, man. Like any type of high low, he was reading things correctly. The Vikings, obviously, they show cover zero, drop eight. They bring pressure. They do a lot of crazy, funky stuff, unlike what anybody else does in the league. Browning had the answers. I mean, he knew where to go with the ball. He didn't like take catastrophic losses or bad plays. And just like you mentioned, just the success, the stats over the past couple of weeks have been really impressive. During that 3-week stretch, the Bengals are second in EPA per play on offense, behind only the Niners. They're fourth in success rate at 48%. I mean, this has been a unit that's humming, averaging over 30 points per game. So I think when you just look at the totality of things, I mean, backup quarterback, they've had some injuries. The offense has been carrying them, which is, a testament to, Zach Taylor and the rest of those guys for, helping him get up to speed.
And what have you seen from T. Higgins? I brought him up. He's making some plays. He's maybe the second guy you think about when you talk about Bengals wide receivers. But how he challenged the Steelers secondary.
Yeah, I think you go back to just like last year, Higgins. It's been really fortunate for the Steelers. They haven't really had to play Higgins or Chase all that much. Like one of those guys has basically missed like most of the matchups here in the last couple of years. But Higgins has a 100-yard game in every season that he's played the Steelers. Each of his first 3 years in the league, he had a 100-yard game. Last year, when they played in November, Higgins went off for like 148 on 9 catches. Cincinnati moved him around the formation. I expect them to do the same. There was no Jamar Chase in that matchup last year. We won't see Jamar Chase. That was officially ruled out, I think, on Thursday. No Jamar Chase this weekend either. So they're going to move him around. I mean, Higgins is the classic throwback X-type ball receiver. I mean, he loves to win vertically, contested catch threat. You saw the spectacular catch that he made against the Vikings to send that game into overtime last week, where he comes back to that underthrown ball, Moss is the cornerback, and then somehow finds a way to have the ball cross the plane. Still one of the more unbelievable plays that I've seen so far this season. So it's going to be a very big test. I think Joey Porter Jr., these are the matchups that you draft a guy like that for, because Porter does have the size. He has the length, the physicality to match up with a guy like Higgins. And I'm really looking forward to, regardless of the results of the game, I'm really looking forward to gauging kind of where Joey Porter Jr. is at. Just based on this matchup alone, because I think Higgins is definitely a number one caliber receiver, and this will be a good kind of barometer for the young guy.
And other side of the matchup, the one thing that did stand out from the performance against the Bengals last time out, it was the first game post Matt Canada. Pat Fryermuth, remember him? He had a big game. Do you think that that matchup could be exploited again this week?
Yeah, I mean they showed some things. Of course, the Bengals showing a lot of that cover too. The Steelers, we've mentioned it several times on the show throughout the season, but they see more cover two than anyone else in the league. So the Steelers really were able to attack, kind of the hole in between the two safeties down the field, get him involved, where he had the best game of not just his season, I think of his career from a yardage perspective. There will be opportunities right there. Of course, we're getting a new quarterback. Lou Anarumo is a good game planner, so I'm sure that there are going to be some adjustments on that side of the ball. But one thing about Freiermuth that I just have been a little bit disappointed with is just over the past couple of weeks, he's been responsible for just some killer plays, man. Like you look back at the interception in the Patriots game, the one that happened early in the first half. He kind of just quits on a route and the ball ends up getting picked. Now, the decision from Trubisky wasn't great in general, but that's a huge play and definitely something that you would not expect from a guy who's been in this offense for several seasons. You think back to last week against the Colts, they had a third down and I think medium, and he's just kind of running this little stick route from an inline position. He goes up, he turns to the middle, but it's zone coverage, and Mitch is expecting him to sit down, and he just keeps running and floating towards the middle, and the ball ends up behind him, and it's Steelers punt. So there's just some things like that where I feel like he's almost not helping the backup quarterbacks the way that he really needs to, because we hear all about the cliches of tight ends being quarterbacks' best friends, safety blanket, security blanket, all that other stuff. It would be nice for another big performance from him just to kind of get Mason Rudolph comfortable, a guy that hasn't played a whole lot of ball here in the last couple of seasons. But Freiermuth's been around. Hopefully those guys have gotten a good amount of reps in practice this week, and they can continue to take advantage of some of the matchups that they had last time out.
Well, Freiermuth doesn't block very well, so he's got to make plays in the passing game.
Right.
Otherwise, what exactly do you do here, to borrow a line from Office Space? All right, so the line was set prior to the announcement that Mason Rudolph would start as opposed to Kenny Pickett. Honestly, I don't think that was going to make that much of a difference, but the Bengals are favorites on the road, -2 over the Steelers, and the over-under is 37, or at least it was earlier this week. Your prediction, Derek, before we sign off.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I think I've been a bad omen for the Steelers here in recent weeks. I keep saying like, all right, they're going to get back on the right track, and they're going to play better. And I don't know, man. I think last week for me personally was just it was just one of those things where I just started to kind of lose hope. If I wanted to spin it to you in a positive way, the Bengals defense, like we talked about the offense being, top 5 in the last 3 weeks since they last played, the Bengals defense is still not playing very well. Like they're near the bottom in the league, a success rate, EPA per play. You can really get after that unit. They're banged up a little bit on that side of the ball. They lost DJ Reader last week. Cam Taylor-Britt's still battling an injury. So I think that Mason Rudolph has the potential to have a good game. Will really depend on, if he takes care of the football, but I do expect them to be able to push the ball down the field, especially, assuming that George Pickens plays. There will be some matchups that they can take advantage of. But I don't think the defense is playing well enough, man. Like I said, 30 points per game for the Bengals offense over the last 3 weeks. I don't think the Steelers are going to be able to hold them to, under 20 points. And kind of like what we've talked about all season long, if opposing teams can get 21 points on the Steelers team, it's a wrap. Like they just don't win games. I think they're now 1-10 or 1-11 over the past 2 seasons when they allow more than 20 points. I think Cincinnati hits that mark, and I anticipate, them coming away victorious. But obviously, I hope I'm wrong.
Steelers, even if they win, according to the NFL's playoff odds on their website, they still would just have a 12% chance of making the playoffs. If they lose, it's basically over. If they win, it's 12%. As of right now, it's about 5%. So most of the prediction sites seem to agree with that. So really, we should be looking toward the future, but it's hard to really say die. This franchise doesn't really do that very well, and I suppose to their credit, but sometimes it might be to their detriment because a couple of more draft slots higher over the last few years maybe would have made a difference. Who knows? But here they are. They're still fighting despite having lost 3 in a row for the first time since very early last season. All right, once again, kickoff 4:30 Saturday. Set your reminder. Then we'll get back to your regularly scheduled football on Sunday for the final 2 weeks of the season. But Steelers, Bengals, enjoy if you can, and we'll talk to you again next week on the Pregame Scout.